Welcome to the Terrible Podcast with your hosts from SteelersDepot.com, where you can find all your latest and greatest Steelers news. It's Dave Bryan and Alex Kozora, always lit, talking Steelers. And now, here's Dave and Alex.
Welcome to the Terrible Podcast, Season 15, Episode 110. He's Dave Bryan. I'm Alex Kozora, SteelersDepot.com. Thanks for being back with us this Monday, Steelers Nation. Dave, Friday show. I know we missed the boat on this one. News always breaks after we record. It was the Aaron Rodgers day. Rodgers officially visited the Pittsburgh Steelers, the first true movement in the Rodgers free agency decision cycle. Left without an agreement. Not a big surprise, but it is the big story of the day. Also, quick disclaimer, Dave and I are recording this Sunday night around 9:30, so if any big Monday morning news occurs, we won't capture that either. But the day right now, whether it's Sunday or Monday, is Aaron Rodgers was in town on Friday, Dave.
Yeah, people listening to this, I guess, Monday morning and all. We jinxed ourselves the other day. We said, just to get it in, Mike Tomlin at the pro day, at the Michigan pro day. We know better than to do stuff like that. Nothing happens until it happens. And we ended up being wrong on that. Terrell Austin supposedly was there, though, for the Michigan pro day. Who else was there? Sheldon White was there. And what's up with Michigan and footage of pro days or something? Why are they so because I know they have the M Blue network or video channel that they own rights to, that they want you to pay a subscription to. I know they have that, but it feels like over the last couple of years they're real tight with like beat reporters and anybody that attends that, as far as video and still shots getting out when it comes in. Because I don't know if you found Terrell Austin there as of yet. I know one of the beat reporters from one of the Detroit newspapers reported him there, and I think it's Dave Burkett, who's very reliable and all like that. But I have yet to find a picture of him and all there. But I trust that he was there, and we know obviously that Mike Tomlin and Omar were not there, because, as you said, they were back in Pittsburgh for what I would imagine was kind of a spur of a moment, meeting with Aaron Rodgers in town, and one that supposedly lasted for, I guess, 6 hours.
Takes a lot to pull Mike Tomlin off the Michigan Pro Day trail. I should have looked up before we started the show. The last time Tomlin was not at a Michigan Pro Day, but of course he and Omar had very good reasons to not go to Ann Arbor. So looks like Rodgers got in probably sometime in the morning and then left sometime, I think it was maybe early afternoon, maybe mid-afternoon, 2-3 o'clock or so. And so it was a 6-hour visit, according to ESPN's Adam Schefter, reportedly a positive visit, where Rodgers met Tomlin, potentially Art Rooney. There's been maybe some confliction on him. Met Arthur Smith as well. Money was not reportedly talked about. The offer's been to Rodgers and his camp for the last 2 weeks, and so it was not a discussion point. This was, by all accounts, a get-to-know-each-other sort of a thing, to kind of get a feel for, okay, meeting each other in person. Is there a good relationship, a good vibe, and can we actually see this work? Because despite all the respect that Rodgers and Tomlin have shown each other, they really don't know each other that well. They haven't spent time together, and so obviously there was a lot to discuss on Friday.
Yeah, but now I guess, the options seem to be dwindling, and later in the afternoon, I think Jameis Winston agreed to kind of a modest deal with some up to kind of incentive money, I guess, with the New York Football Giants. So maybe that's their Mason Rudolph signing, if you will, kind of protection. I know there's still some, I don't know, speculation, quasi reports or whatever, as has been the case throughout all this, that Rodgers might still be in the picture for the Giants, but as has been the case now for for I don't know what, a couple weeks now. It feels like it's down to the Giants and the Steelers or retirement. It doesn't sound like the Minnesota Vikings are really interested in Aaron Rodgers, and yeah, obviously probably not at an expensive price. It sounds like they might bring somebody in that room to help with JJ McCarthy, but they sound like dedicated to him, and they probably don't want to go over the top spending on a veteran quarterback that they would feel kind of obligated to running the whole season with. And obviously out of the two, it feels like the Steelers have the hand up in this situation. I'm not going to say that the signing of Jameis Winston is a slam dunk that they're done with Aaron Rodgers, but it certainly the timing was kind of weird with Rodgers going to Pittsburgh, on Friday afternoon. And by Friday night, you have Jameis Winston agreeing to a deal with them. And then, we're still playing the waiting game to find out where Russell Wilson might end up as well. He's obviously visited with Cleveland and went to New York to visit with them throughout this process here. So it still feels like the log hole, in that's causing the log jam here with all this is Aaron Rodgers. And I would imagine we've kind of talked about this a couple of times throughout, talking about Aaron Rodgers. The deal's probably out there, like they're saying, and it's either there's probably not any dickering involved in it. It's like, do you want this, and do you want to come here and play here for one season, or don't you? And that feels like where it's at. Obviously, Aaron Rodgers is going to have to decide if this is potentially where his last spot will be, if he even wants to continue his career anymore. With him taking a visit such as this, and kind of the ego, and maybe potentially a chance to win one last time, especially coming off of the disastrous, probably not wanting to go out the way that he went out last year with the Jets. It feels like he probably would be leaning towards playing, and I guess it just comes down to whether or not he thinks it's a fit, and if it's worth the money that the Steelers offer him to do it.
And if he was considering retirement, he probably wouldn't be taking visits to teams like Pittsburgh. He'd sort out, do I even want to play first? And then if you do, you start taking your tours. Now, nothing's official until it's official, and Aaron Rodgers can be certainly unpredictable, and so you don't want to assume anything here, but it seems like Pittsburgh is in the driver's seat more than ever for Aaron Rodgers. The question is, Dave, and the question everyone has is, what happens next? Where do things go from here? Will Rodgers take a visit with the Giants? If he's going to talk with Pittsburgh, then why not talk to New York and get a feel for their coaching staff to truly be able to compare and contrast? And beyond that, when will Rodgers decide? Conceivably, the decision can come at any single moment.
Yeah, and I guess we don't know for sure. I mean, he obviously being in New York and having a place in New York, I wouldn't imagine that it would have to go too far to go to a meeting there. I wonder if a meeting's maybe already happened that we don't know about, but it feels like maybe that would have been sussed out at some point before him, throughout this whole process, about him having maybe kind of an official visit with the Giants, or maybe Aaron Rodgers' schedule's already been booked up since his official release from the Jets, that has kind of prevented that. And maybe we'll turn around on Monday afternoon and there'll be a report about him officially visiting with the Giants. But I mean, we're down to there's not many places Aaron Rodgers could go, at least you don't think at this point. And you'd have to think that the Steelers would be in the driver's seat at this point.
And unless Minnesota jumps back in, it is down to two teams, the Giants or the Steelers. And as we said all along, the Steelers always made more sense for Rodgers to go to Pittsburgh than stay in New York. A better team, more competitive team, head coach he really respects, an offense that added DK Metcalf, a better media market, et cetera, et cetera. So that's what the tea leaves are telling me right now.
I just can't believe that. And I said this several shows ago. How the hell did we get to this point with Aaron Rodgers, especially with the whole mobility answer again from Mike Tomlin earlier in the offseason? And with it, certainly, my money would have been on one of Justin Fields or Russell Wilson re-signing, and that didn't come to fruition there. And you start running out of options there at some point. And here we are talking about, are we finally on the cusp of Aaron Rodgers signing with this team to be their quarterback in 2025?
And if you thought Pittsburgh would get frustrated and bow out of the running for Aaron Rodgers. That's not going to happen now. That door is firmly closed. They did not skip the Michigan Pro Day, spent 6 hours with the guy to have their patience ever run thin. They are going to be committed to Rodgers until he makes a decision, until he says, I don't want to come to Pittsburgh. So they're going to wait this thing out as long as it takes.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Wait for the yes or no, and then move on to plan C or D or whatever it is after that, you know?
Right. Usually when it comes to tinfoil, I just will only entertain our tinfoil hats, Dave. But do you give Mike Florio's what he wrote, I think over the weekend or Friday, his idea of Rodgers came to Pittsburgh to see if there would be any leaks because the news wasn't broken until Jerry Dulac, local reporter, did a great job to scoop that from all the national beat guys who you imagine have been trying to get information as much as they can. Florio thinks this was sort of a test to see who would leak it, where it would come from. Is this just Florio being Florio? Is there anything to it?
I can't imagine he's going to fly all that way just on a fact-finding mission to find out, if, how quickly something can leak in that building. And even if it was, he at least would, be able to probably pinpoint it early in his signing and stop it from there. It seems to be a private guy and all like that. And there's probably leaks throughout, the NFL, in with every team. I just find it hard to imagine that his whole itinerary and checklist, if you will, to-do list, he had written down on a yellow, post-it note, figure out number one, figure out where if team has leaks. Number two, look at bathrooms for toilet paper. Just that you go there. He's seriously considering going there, and he probably wants to make sure it's a right fit. Now, down the list, could he be saying, "Man, how did that get out so quick?" That kind of thing there. But
Yeah, I mean, it could be both. Obviously, he's coming to
right.
Pittsburgh to learn, and maybe you'd also learn about how it gets reported in the process. But I think this is more Florio just being Mike
Yeah.
Florio.
I mean, if he's not going to sign because he's concerned about leaks coming out, well, then how all in was he anyway? Where is his motives at?
And going to New York or staying in New York is not going to help from the media
Right.
leak chatter aspect of things. And I suppose he probably, if there was any credence to that, Pittsburgh passed the test because it took a while for the reporting to come out, and none of the national guys got it. So again, I think it's all Florio just trying to, he's this guy that what's the old saying? You hear hoofbeats and think zebras, not horses. This is probably Florio doing that, trying to read too much into a situation. But, uh, I think Rodgers wanted to come here, as you said, to know the coaching staff because he probably didn't know Khan and Tomlin. And I don't think there's any connection with Arthur Smith really outside of kind of a similar LaFleur system. Remember what Matt LaFleur was in Tennessee and then went to Green Bay to become the head coach there. But that's probably a stretch in terms of knowing the man personally. And that's to me the intent behind Rodgers coming to Pittsburgh.
Well, we got on somehow talking about horses and zebras, and did
You
you
never heard that saying? I love
mix
that
a
saying.
mix a unicorn in there or something? Or
It's a great saying. It's more of a medical term.
oh,
Phrase.
okay. I I can't imagine that facility's probably as big as most anyway. So if Aaron Rodgers is seen walking around in there, people are gonna mumble, "Hey, did you know Aaron Rodgers is in there?" And they probably not hard for that thing to get out. You know.
And Pittsburgh, to their credit, they keep things as tightly closed off as any team I can think of. I mean, the DK Metcalf trade wasn't known until it was announced as this thing is happening. It's been agreed to. There was not even an inkling that Pittsburgh was a serious front runner. There were rumors and connections. Pittsburgh's needed receiver, but it was not seriously entertained. And the reporting that Metcalf wanted a warm weather climate and he had to go to a contender, he dismissed that as nonsense. So Pittsburgh again was able to keep things quiet until a deal was done.
All right. So now we continue to wait. Will this happen Monday, Tuesday? We just sit and wait. Same old. As far as just waiting to find out what if Aaron Rodgers will be the quarterback on this team. And yeah, look, I mean, can this team win games with Aaron Rodgers as their quarterback? The answer to that's obviously yes. You do worry about his age and the wear and tear on him and the lack of mobility and going to be playing behind an extremely young line overall. That'll have some questions about it going into this. You do worry about kind of the validity maybe of not validity uh what's the word? Uh, with Metcalf and Pickens, just what's the word? Volatility. That's the word I'm looking
Volatility.
for
Yeah.
of guys like that. But Aaron Rodgers has handled worse than that before. I mean, he's had some high profile wide receivers that he's dealt with over the years, and I'm sure he's got his own way of dealing with that, and guys begging for the football and. I'm sure he'll want a large say in the kind of offense that they run there. Arthur Smith might be an offensive assistant, but if Aaron Rodgers comes into town, because I'm sure Aaron Rodgers is going to be set in his ways that he wants to do things, and there'll probably be some feathers ruffled, much like supposedly there were with Russell Wilson and Arthur Smith late last season. So I think you need to probably try to establish that out as much as you can, maybe in a 6-hour meeting of saying, look, what kind of offense are we going to run? This is what I like to run. I know your personnel already for the most part. This is what I think they can do. And I know Arthur Smith's going to have his ways of probably doing things, but you do have a vet quarterback that has seen a lot throughout his time and has obviously been successful and won a Super Bowl. And, you're going to have to cater not only to his skill set, but things that he likes to do.
Yeah, it's a great question. I need to really dive into the Jets offense and get some of the data collected from our data expert, Clayton Ecker, to see what was Rodgers' under center rate last year, what was his play action rate, maybe his bootleg rate, if that can be attained, because those are some of the core components of the Arthur Smith offense. What you've kind of hinted at the answer, Dave, but what would need to change more? Who would need to change more, Arthur Smith or Aaron Rodgers, to make this thing work?
I think probably Arthur Smith, because once again, Aaron Rodgers just comes off as a real, kind of guy, and with reason and the badges and the war wounds to show that he does certain things a lot better than he does other certain things, and that he for certain offenses to work a certain way probably have to have certain elements that he's used to running and all. So I would imagine that it would have to be Arthur Smith that would have to kind of kiss the ring to some degree, if you will.
And for any coach, they should tailor their offense to the strengths of their personnel. And if they have to adjust the scheme and take this thing out or add this thing in or lean on this concept more than something else to maybe what's ideal to them, that is their job, is to let players be able to thrive and elevate their game and put them in positions to win. And if you're rigid in your scheme, you're going to run counter to that mission. And so whether it was Rodgers or whether it was some other outside quarterback that comes in, even Mason Rudolph, what is his skill set? What are his strengths and weaknesses? Any good coach and coordinator worth their weight has to be able to do that. So I'm with you overall, but there'll be a little give and take. I'm sure it's a little like, and it's obviously not 1-to-1, but when Matt Canada was promoted to OC in Ben's final year, the offense really just was what Ben wanted it to be, because we're not going to change things in Ben's final year. Now I know Rodgers is an outsider, and it's not 1-to-1, like I said, but that's kind of the comparison that comes to mind.
Well, when you get if you're down by 2 scores in the middle of the game, what do you think? Aaron Rodgers is going to probably start drawing plays up in the sand too, because what's he going to say? What are they going to do? Fire me?
That's true.
What are they going to do? Bench me? We need to win some games here. You run this, you run that. I'll get you the ball.
That's literally Ben Ball right there.
Right, right. And I can imagine that. And that's what that's also, you're paying for that knowledge that comes in that experience. That's why you're probably going to end up paying $35 million for 1 year for a guy like that, because of the experience and all, been there and done that. So, it Aaron Rodgers as quarterback on the Steelers, is something that, going into the offseason, I didn't think we'd be talking about. But B, if indeed it happens, there will be a level of entertainment to it, both good and bad, I think. Not only good and bad on the field, but good and bad probably with the press conferences and just maybe some of the volatility that comes along with that, and you got two uh, alpha type wide receivers, if you will, and DK Metcalf and George Pickens. How is that dynamic going to go? I don't think we're going to be in for a dull week if that happens there. And once again, can they win ball games with Aaron Rodgers as their quarterback, along with DK Metcalf and George Pickens and what they've seemed to be assembled on offense and defense? The answer is yes. But are we talking once again about in a very, very competitive AFC North outside, and we'll see what happens with the Browns, but you'd have to think the Bengals are going to be right there in the running again. You have to obviously think the Ravens are going to be there in the running again. Are you going to be able to, is Aaron Rodgers going to be enough to get you over one of those two teams at the very least and get in as a wild card? And is it going to be enough with Aaron Rodgers to capture that elusive playoff win that you haven't had since 2016? And even on top of that, you don't go into the or should go into the season saying, "Oh boy, thank God we're paying Aaron Rodgers $30-something million." I'm assuming to just win one playoff game. We want to make a viable try to run at this thing, but is simply adding Aaron Rodgers enough to do that?
No, not alone. That's why they go out there and they trade for a DK Metcalf, and they're likely to draft a running back in the mid rounds and find some more playmakers and add some more potency to this offense. I know we're talking about Rodgers like he's already signed. Maybe by the time people listen to this, it's already happened, but it seems to be the logical conclusion to this whole thing. If there is anything slightly more worthwhile to take away from Florio, he wrote late Sunday night that the Steelers, quoting the one league source, are a safe bet to land Aaron Rodgers. Nothing guaranteed, but that was the phrasing that Florio used, safe bet. So what is this more?
I just don't know where you go if Aaron Rodgers says no, I don't want to play here, or B, I'm going to retire. I mean, I just don't know where you go from there, other than maybe calling up the Falcons and try to get something done there. I just the only other obviously road to go down with is just give Mason Rudolph the ball.
And it's so funny, and you're right, I agree. We don't even talk about Russell Wilson hardly anymore because that just seems that seems so unlikely to happen. So my question to you was going to be, is Pittsburgh's interest in Rodgers more about they feel that Rodgers can truly get them to where they want to go? Or is it that they're so out on Russ and Rodgers is the only other viable full-time, clear number one quarterback remaining, that he's their guy because he has to be their guy?
Not knowing what offers were out there to look, they could, if they wanted to give more money to Justin Fields, Justin Fields would probably be the quarterback, right?
Sure. Yeah, Rodgers was not number one on their list, but I'm saying, like, is this more about they believe in Rodgers of the available options? They believe in Rodgers more, or they believe in Russ less?
Yes.
Okay, that's probably true.
I think that they were, as they've clicked down on their quarterback options for this offseason and gone through them, they're at the point where they truly believe that Aaron Rodgers right now, with what's available, is the quarterback that gives them the best chance to make a potential run at a Super Bowl in 2025. And that's where they're at in the whole process here.
Which you really wonder, how bad does it have to be with Russ for them to completely ignore him the way that he's been ignored? Is it all about, we just can't bring this guy back because the stench of the 5-game losing streak and we just can't run that back? Or is it truly that, is it truly that big of a rift between Arthur Smith and Russ that Tomlin is just looking at this and saying, we can't try to make this thing work?
And maybe Russ is a different person behind doors too, and that we don't know. It's probably a combination of all of it. They know what Russell Wilson gives them on the field. The old joke about the Ravens during the Hard Knocks saying this guy's either a 3-pointer or he's trying to take the layup. And most of those 3-pointers aren't down the middle. Teams know how to defend him, and now they have a full year of tape of defending him with Arthur Smith as offensive coordinator. So it'll probably be a little bit, easier unless Russell Wilson starts doing things a lot different outside of it. And then if Russell Wilson starts doing things a little bit outside of his comfort level and norm and throwing the football away 18 times or whatever, however many we calculated that to be, or are they setting themselves up for more turnovers because of it? And I think they're at the fact that we know what Russ is, and we're not totally convinced that he can we can make a Super Bowl with him. And you probably always think about the unknown that you don't have, and thinking, well, maybe we can have the magic elixir for Aaron Rodgers to get back there.
Sure. And is that a problem for the organization? This grass is always greener. Bring in this new guy and try to make it work and have this rotating and revolving door. I've talked about, if Rodgers is the guy, it's going to be 5 straight years of a different week 1 quarterback. And it's hard to, I think, win that way when you're constantly rotating through. And there's a good chance it'll be 6 and 6 years if Rodgers does retire after 2025.
Yeah, I mean, perpetual quarterback purgatory right now,
Right. So,
and it all started, with even when Ben was here, and they spent the draft pick on Mason Rudolph, but they that obviously flamed out, and Ben probably stayed a year too long, and then they took another stab as Kevin Colbert went out the door with Kenny Pickett, and obviously that didn't work out there, and they haven't even drafted their next one yet. And even if they were to draft one this year, how long is it going to take you to find out if that, it's going to take you another 20 games probably of that kid starting, whoever it is, to find out if he can be the guy. And what if he isn't,
Right. As Kenny Pickett wasn't. So there is no guarantees here. And that's the difficult position Pittsburgh finds themselves in. And I still believe that they take this each offseason with this win now mentality because of the defense, because of Cam Hayward, because of TJ Watt, and to a lesser degree now because of Minkah Fitzpatrick, to try to win now while those pillars are in place and still able to lead this defense.
At least it looks good on paper. Hey, we got Aaron Rodgers, who was how many times was Aaron Rodgers MVP?
4. I believe 4.
And obviously he has 1 Super Bowl win. We unfortunately are able to recall that very easily. Several playoff appearances and all like that. And everybody, at least that looks good trying to sell it to the rest of the team. Hey, we went out here and got you Aaron Rodgers, a named commodity. And we're doing that because we think we owe it to the veterans on this team to do that.
I've also had this thought, and I'm probably going to write about it at some point. I just think Mike Tomlin is wired to win. And every coach obviously wants to win, but he has just never been part of a full rebuild before. He comes to Pittsburgh, high expectations, a team 2 years removed from a Super Bowl win. He wins a Super Bowl himself in his second NFL season. And you had a franchise quarterback. You were in it every single year. Your thought was, let's go win another ring. Even his time in Tampa Bay in 2002, his second season with the Bucks, they win a Super Bowl. And so this is a guy that has been around Lombardi's early in his NFL stops. I think the only losing season he's had as an NFL coach, and I might be missing a season in here. He said maybe 3 of them. He had 2 in Tampa Bay coming off the Super Bowl victory, and then his year in Minnesota, I just checked, they were 6 and 10 that season. So 3 losing seasons in his entire 20-plus year coaching NFL tenure. And so I think he's just wired as a guy that has come into places, had success, been around that. And once you have that, it's hard to hit the reset button.
Yeah. Look, Aaron Rodgers isn't a spring chicken, obviously, but Tom Brady did win his last Super Bowl at what, 44? No, and I'm not trying to compare these two here, because Aaron Rodgers' the last couple of seasons really has shown chink in the armor, right?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, he had the Achilles tear 2 years ago and then played hurt. I mean, that's like Rodgers can still play, as you said. The guy can still play from the pocket and be a high-level quarterback, but the question is his body holding up, fitting in the offense, making the pieces work, these alpha personalities of Rodgers and Pickens and Metcalf. And then my biggest point of contention is this is looking like and likely to be a one-year thing. And so is this really going to get you to Super Bowl contention? I don't think it does. And then where do you go from here? There's no continuity. You can't build on anything. You are having these rotating options at quarterback, and you just can't. You're never going to find. I don't want to do stability for the sake of stability, but you just can't play roulette at quarterback and expect to have any sort of traction.
Right. And look, Aaron Rodgers is obviously a veteran and been around the league and all, but the rest of the offense outside of Pickett, I mean, outside of Metcalf and let's say Freiermuth, this is a young group that Aaron. How's Aaron going to relate to? How do you do, fellow kid? And maybe Russ to some degree had some. You don't have that offensive line that's been together 4 or 5 years like the Steelers had, in the later years of Ben Roethlisberger, and Roethlisberger was obviously around so long anyway. It was his team anyway, and now you're having a guy come in on the defense. You don't worry about because you got the leaders over there in Cam Hayward and all like that. And but how is this team going to react with granddad over there on the offensive side of football?
Yeah, no, it's a great point. And how well can Rodgers lead as he's still kind of learning Pittsburgh and the offense himself? That's always a tricky thing to do. And even in Ben's, I would better point to his early career when Ben came in. He didn't have to be the leader. He had a veteran offensive line of Alan Faneca and Jeff Hardings and Marvell Smith, and so you had these established guys, and they were the leaders of the team. Jerome Bettis was the leader of the team. The defense,
You
they
had
were
Hines
a
Ward
core
there,
group.
right?
Hines, yeah, of course, Hines Ward, leader of that team. And so, it's a different type of environment. And Pittsburgh has had that leadership vacuum post Ben, which Najee Harris spoke about recently. And he's spoken about even when he was a Pittsburgh Steeler. So, Rodgers can certainly bring that, but how well can you lead as you are trying to get your own ducks in a row can be difficult. And again, speaks to that quarterback roulette where there's no stable leadership set in place. And it's hard to really build and grow around that.
Excuse me. I tell you what, he better not miss any OTA days, even though they're voluntary in nature, because that will be obviously a big story if that happens. He better not miss any camp time. He better get more than his fair share of reps at camp. He better not stay. He better not have his own private apartment just outside. He better be staying in the dorms and all like that, or else that's going to be another distraction type story. Because he's going to have to come in and not only insert, whatever changes Arthur Smith, kind of tailor for the offense from last year, but whatever changes that Aaron Rodgers is going to demand on having as well too. It's gonna take an all in and not just practice time either. It's going to be the meeting rooms. It's going to be the after hour sessions. He's going to, there's not, and then every time he's on the Pat McAfee show is going to be discussed, right? Is he still going to do that? And how much of distraction will that be viewed? And Aaron's Aaron. Aaron's not going to roll through the entire offensive roster and talk about how good everybody is. He's probably not going to be afraid to say somebody ran the wrong route. Whatever, somebody missed a block or whatever. And how's that all going to sit? It just, the dynamic is really, really weird here when you have a guy like Aaron Rodgers coming into this team, especially with, the overall youth that you have on offense. I mean, this offensive line, assuming the 5 play together that are going to play together, that's going to be the first time that we see that combination run, right?
Yeah, with Fautanu being hurt last year, it would be. I mean, the good thing is a lot of those guys are at least coming back. There may be some
Right.
different roles and positions. Broderick Jones flipping, Fautanu getting back in the lineup, but Frazier's returning, say Mullins returning, McCormick's returning. I mean, Jones and Fautanu are returning as well. And so there is something to be said about that group. Hopefully no longer needing to add starting pieces the way that they have the last, couple of off seasons through the draft or signings like say Malu, James Daniels earlier. But yeah, how well the O line plays is a whole separate and I think critical question.
Right. And, him having to learn, he's never played with any of these receivers before. And Roman Wilson's only played 5 snaps. It
And
just
that's the thing, like, it's gotta come together, it's gotta get together fast too. In
right.
an AFC North that's ultra competitive, who knows what the schedule will look like, maybe they'll have a harder start to the schedule as opposed to an easier start that they had last year. Like, you can't get this thing figured out in week 7, so it's gotta come together really fast with these new pieces.
Well, here's the thing with all that. Let's say this ends up going this way with Aaron Rodgers. Maybe you're wishing for the AFC games to be stacked at the end of the season,
Yeah.
as opposed to early in the season, and then watch it come out this time where they play, I don't know, 3 of their first 6 against the AFC North. Baltimore
Mhm.
and Cincinnati, and is that a good thing necessarily?
Yeah, maybe it's not because you're facing tough tests as you're still trying to come together and Arthur Smith learn Aaron Rodgers and Rodgers learn everybody and all that comes with that change there. Also, quick side note, have I made this point before on the podcast? And I didn't think of it first. I saw it talked about on Twitter. If Rodgers signs with Pittsburgh, I know that the Packers have been long rumored as the opponent for the Dublin game, but I can't imagine the NFL would actually put Green Bay and Pittsburgh at a 9:30 a.m. time spot for the Ireland game. It would have to be a different opponent.
No, I mean, I still think it could be, and look, I think one of the draws here for Aaron Rodgers to come to Pittsburgh is he'd get a chance to play the Packers, the Jets, and the Bears.
That's a good point. Yeah, he's owned the Bears too, right? He's always
Right.
had success against them. I didn't even think about that. But I don't know. I just for that big of a storyline to kind of get shoehorned into the AM time slot, I feel
Oh,
that's a
well, here's
prime
the
time
thing.
game to me.
They would have already probably had they probably already had that game. They already have the opponent probably already set.
You think?
I do. Yeah,
I don't think.
I would think for
Because you'd
I
have to have all those well, I guess you wouldn't have to have the whole schedule mapped
and
out.
I
But if
and
it's
I bet they with did you see that special that they have on that now and how they do all that with all the cloud and the computers and
yeah,
all
it's
like
all
that?
AI.
And
There used to be a guy, like there was a guy
yeah,
that made the
yeah.
schedule
I
almost
would have hated to have
single-handedly.
that job, but now now they you just throw this thing in and it's fascinating, with how that's done. And I would imagine they're down to probably to about their 3 best looking schedules now, complete NFL schedules at this point, and within that, if I would be surprised if they don't have the opponent already chosen
But
for the Ireland game.
that's the thing. If it's, computer generated, you can more quickly adjust to changes in schedules than you could whenever you just had Frank or whatever his name was making the whole schedule himself and throwing a wrench into everything.
Well, maybe they want you. Look, you got the two of the most historic franchises in the NFL, and the Packers and Steelers. That's what they're wanting. They're wanting force. They want to force people up early in the morning to have the TV on NFL Network to watch that game.
Yeah, it just that feels like a primetime game all day. Rodgers facing his old team in Pittsburgh, the ratings draw that they are, that just feels like a Sunday night or Monday night game to me.
All right, I'll be surprised if it's not Steelers Packers.
All
Of
right,
course, I've
fair
been.
enough.
I mean, that's why you got to be careful about talking about absolutes and
Sure.
talking about Mike Tomlin going to be at the Michigan Pro Day. Because you think but you don't know, right? But I just throw this in the bucket of all of the Dave. I'll be surprised that have happened and not happened over the years. I'll be surprised if it's not the Packers and Steelers playing in Ireland.
Anything else Rodgers related from this visit? Any other reporting? I mean, the reporting was pretty light overall in terms of what went on in this meeting, which is no surprise given the kind of close circles that Rodgers and the Steelers seem to run. But is there anything I'm missing that we should talk about?
It just feels like I'm in this twilight zone with all this here. If we go back to that, why are the Steelers always on the end of these things? It seems like you had the Ayuk thing last year, and like I said, I don't know how the hell we got here where we're having super serious conversations about Aaron Rodgers being this team's quarterback in 2025. But here we are, and we still, after all this, we still don't have finality on it. And I thought for sure we would know by 2 or 3 days into free agency at least who the quarterback would be.
Sure, I did too. I thought quarterback was first move, first things first, to let the other pieces fall into place. But I'm sure Pittsburgh would have liked that ideally, either Fields resigning or Rodgers give a quick, yes, I'm coming to Pittsburgh in that first week. But when your options are limited and you don't really hold the cards and Pittsburgh does not have leverage here, then Rodgers gets to decide. And I'm not asking you to predict this. No one can predict this, but how much longer do you think we have to wait? Because my first thought when Rodgers came to Pittsburgh was, okay, this thing may not get done today, but this thing's going to get wrapped up here pretty soon. Visiting Pittsburgh, his first trip, maybe his only trip, signed, sealed, delivered, essentially. Reporting afterwards was Rodgers is still in no rush to make a decision.
Yeah, I don't know when it's going to get done. It'll probably happen Tuesday when I'm out. I got a buddy in town Tuesday, and I'm going to go to the International Pizza Show with him, or at least try to Tuesday morning. It'll happen when I'm on the floor there.
Yeah, it always seems to be the worst timing of it all. I remember last year with Justin Fields trade, I was driving somewhere to an event and had just left my house and the Fields news broke. So it'll probably be you on the timing this time around.
Yeah, yeah. All right. The rest of the quarterback talk around the NFL. We mentioned the Jameis Winston going to signing with the Giants. It's not too cumbersome of a contract overall. I suppose you could kind of call that their Mason Rudolph answer to if they don't get Aaron Rodgers. I do think there's an interesting conversation to be had today about Russell Wilson, based on kind of looking about maybe if he doesn't land with the Steelers, which obviously it doesn't look like he will, if he does end up landing, let's say, with the Cleveland Browns instead. And our own Ross McCorkle wrote about this on Sunday. If you haven't read the post, you should read it. It kind of came together kind of a different way. I think Ross was going to write a little bit different angle on it. And then the more we kind of dug into some things related to compensatory value picks and all, the post kind of formed itself here, and the whole aspect I'll give the whole thing away because it's not rocket science here. If Russ has already got, because the options are dwindled down for him too. There's only so many places Russell Wilson can probably go at the kind of money that he's wanting to get, and the Cleveland Browns could potentially be one of those landing spots. And let's say him and the Browns figure out that they're right for each other, and nobody else is going to be in the fray to sign him. It would be in the Browns' best interest to wait until the Monday after the NFL draft to sign him, because that would deny the Steelers the compensatory value for losing him as a unrestricted free agent and him counting in the formula. And people are saying, well, don't the Steelers already have the max on the board at this time? Well, due to was it the Mike Williams contract that came in lower than expected, or the Najee, or one of the two came in lower than expected? That ended up having a cancel out on the Steelers side. So I think technically right now, at least according to Nick Corte, the Steelers officially have 3 compensatory picks set for 2026, not 4 like what was the original speculation there. So if Russell Wilson was to obviously sign for $20 million or more, you're talking about a 5th or a 4th round draft pick compensatory there that would obviously go on the Steelers ledger there, and it would also count. I don't know where the Browns sit on their gain and losses and all like that, but it could impact that as well too. So could we get into a situation here where Russell Wilson is out of options, has something worked out with the Browns, and then they say, hey, we don't, in addition to not hurting our compensatory value table here, we want to make damn sure that we don't give the Steelers an additional compensatory pick here. So with that, we're going to wait to bring Russ in to officially sign his contract after that first Monday after the draft, much kind of in the same way that the Baltimore Ravens, I think, did with Alejandro Villanueva a few years ago.
Yeah, right. He signed the day after the draft, I believe, even though the agreement, I think, was reported out a week earlier. But that contract was tabled until it did not count against the comp formula for either side. And even if Corte is slightly off, and he rarely is, and if Pittsburgh had still the 4 comp pick projections of a 3rd, a 4th, and 2 6s,
you can improve one.
Yeah, you could drop off one of those 6s, and if Russ brought in a 4th or a 5th or whatever it was, now you would have, say, a 3rd, 2 4ths, and a 6, as opposed to a 3rd, a 4th, and 2 6th-round comp selections. So even there's a benefit to that. So, is that going to be part of the calculation? Potentially, although I would counter that and say, if you're Cleveland, do you want to not know who your quarterback is officially until early May. That's not ideal for a team that needs to have some direction themselves.
Yeah, for whatever reason, though, too, they might want to be looking at the draft as well, too, hard, and they still might. And so if given their druthers and knowing for sure they have Russell Wilson in their back pocket, why wouldn't they wait?
I guess the benefit would be you get Russ in your building, you get a playbook right away, he gets assimilated with the team, and you don't have the outstanding question of what do we do at quarterback. You're right; they're going to be looking at quarterback very strongly in the draft. Shedeur Sanders certainly could end up there, assuming Cam Ward goes number 1 to Tennessee. But in the same way that Pittsburgh's feeling the angst of not having a quarterback on the roster now, I'm sure Cleveland is feeling the same angst right now.
And the side story to the side story, should Russell Wilson end up in Cleveland, how funny would that be? Because he's going to be there with Kenny Pickett, and Kenny Pickett's the one that wanted out of Pittsburgh when Russell Wilson arrived there. So some of these scripts, you can't predict some of this stuff.
And you're facing one of those quarterbacks twice in 2025,
Right.
maybe one of both. You never know. And the storylines galore there of a former Steelers quarterback facing his whole team, whether that's Russ or Kenny Pickett. So it would, draw out perfectly. Now, I do think
And
if
wouldn't Russell
Rodgers,
Wilson maybe like to stick it to the Steelers
yeah,
there out the door by signing the day after the draft?
that's true. That's a fair point. But if Rodgers comes to Pittsburgh, I still think the Giants could be in on Russ, and that seems to be the place I think Russ would go to if it came down to the Giants versus the Browns.
Okay, maybe.
But if that doesn't happen, if New York does not happen for whatever reason, do we know the money on Winston's contract? It was a 2-year deal. Do we
It
know
was
details?
I wasn't a base like 5 million with an up to with incentives around 9 or something like
Okay,
that.
so it's backup money.
Right.
Okay. Do we know the Browns' comp situation too? Are they in line to get a couple of compensatory selections? I mean, I don't know. Have they had any major free agent losses? Amari Cooper's still out there. He may be a post draft signing. Are they projected to get a haul?
The Cleveland Browns looks like they have balanced out completely right now. So they're not due any. They've had 2 lost and 2 gained. So doesn't s- and each side they have non-CFAs gained that don't qualify. So it doesn't appear that they have anything to gain or lose right now.
Right. They won't lose a comp pick if they were to sign Russell Wilson. Now, again, the calculation could still be let's make sure Pittsburgh doesn't improve their standing, but at least from the perspective of the Browns aren't directly hurting themselves if they did sign Russell Wilson.
Well, yet, but they still have a couple of their own unrestricted free. Where's Nick Chubb going to go? Where is Cooper going to go?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's fair and valid. I don't know what Chubb. I think he's going to have to sign cheaply. Cooper could move the needle a little bit, but he's still out there in free agency. Will he be a post draft signing? His market seems to be pretty light. I'm not sure what other free agents they have out there, but worth watching for sure.
Right, right.
Dave, let's talk about the draft here and not draft picks, but draft prospects here in 2025. We've now learned of 2 more reported or self admitted pre draft visitors for Pittsburgh. These have not come in the building yet. We don't know dates on when they will, but reporting from, I think it was Ryan Fowler and Justin Mello, said that Ollie Gordon, the running back from Oklahoma State, is going to have a pre draft visit with Pittsburgh. And then speaking at his Florida State Pro Day, defensive lineman Joshua Farmer, he's a busy man before the draft. He's got a bunch of visits lined up around the NFL, including one with Pittsburgh.
Farmer's more of what, a 4th, 5th round guy?
I believe Mock Draft Database had him as a 3rd round projection, so we're probably talking that 3rd, 4th round range for him.
All right. I've got to get into the tape on him, but look, it wouldn't hurt my feelings. I've said this several times for this team to draft 2 defensive linemen.
Yeah, and if they, for whatever reason, don't take one at 21, could Farmer be the guy at 83? That to me is logical in the sense of that's the guy to target. Is it logical to skip on defensive line in the 1st round? Different discussion. But I could see Farmer being the pick in the 3rd round. The report from our Tom Mead, who wrote up the report on Joshua Farmer, toolsy, he's big, he's long, doesn't have quite the height you look for, but 35.25-inch arms. Had a fairly productive 2024 season despite playing on a pretty bad disappointing Seminoles team. Has to improve his pass rush plan, his hand use, but there is a size, strength component, and hopefully some things. Kind of reminded me of, it was the LSU guy last year, Mason Taylor? No, what was the LSU
Oh,
defensive end?
yeah. Smith, right? What?
Mason Smith, I think you're right. Yeah, Mason Smith. Kind of reminds me a little bit of that. Maybe not quite as tall, a little thicker than Mason Smith was, but kind of a similar moldable lump of clay to work with.
Forgot to look at what his alignment was this
I think
past.
it was primarily B gap. A lot of his snaps, I'm pretty sure, were B gap.
Didn't I? Let's see. Farmer 2024 played 513 total snaps, 435 of them in the B gap, like you said, 31 over tackle, 30 in the A gap. His run defense was, according to PFF, just kind of slightly above average, maybe.
Okay, so he's going to come in, and then Gordon reportedly coming in. Had Gordon been in the draft 2 years ago, he might have been a potential first round pick. He had a great season and then really fell off. I think there was some off field stuff, maybe some weight concerns. But if you can get the Ollie Gordon of 2 years ago, you really have something at running back.
All right, and they're probably not going to be the last running back we see come in that door either for a
No,
pre-draft visit.
I mean, to me, this really speaks to them taking that third, fourth round running back because all the
Yeah.
guys they brought in have been in that range. DJ Giddens, Bashal Tootin, Dylan Sampson, Gordon. Gordon might be a later round pick because of the class being so strong, but they're all kind of in that same bucket. You're not bringing in, so far at least, and this could change, a Marion Hampton and Ashton Genty and the Ohio State kids and Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson. Those guys have not come in for visits. Now they're going to be at some of these pro days. They'll probably be at the Ohio State pro day. Don't have to bring those guys in, but the vibe I've been getting pretty consistently is that third, fourth round range for the running back to be taken.
I agree, and we kind of been thinking that would be the possibility throughout this thing, especially since the second round draft pick was traded.
Right, right. Is it a must for Pittsburgh to take D-line at 21, or how much
Yes.
wiggle room? All right, fair enough.
Yes,
So,
yes, yes.
What if Harmon? I shouldn't give those hypotheticals, but you're kind of banking on Harmon and Grant, and now those guys have to come in for visits because Pittsburgh, in terms of Tomlin and Kahn, were not at either pro day.
Yeah, you'd think that both those guys are going to come in, and I guess it's a fair hypothetical. I mean, and that's where I think you potentially get into the talk. We talked about the safeties and them looking at a couple of these safeties as kind of a fallback if one of those two aren't there. Even though this is, I mean, where does the Ole Miss kid, the defensive lineman, come in? Is he the third option as a first rounder?
Walter Nolan, yeah, that's the other name to at least mention. There's some questions about scheme fit. I think would be, it's a little kind of Milton Williams like to me. It feels like, but he'll be in the discussion as well. His pro day, is that this week? When the Ole Miss pro day, I know that was that Baldy report.
Wasn't it like
that
the 28th or something like that for the Ole Miss pro day?
Let's use the power of the internet and go find out. You are right, Dave, as usual, March 28th.
All right.
Which is that this week? My days are all running
well,
together.
Today's the 23rd, so that would be
Friday.
like Friday, wouldn't it?
Yes, sir. 2 for 2. It'll be Friday's pro day.
All right, and then let's see, leading into this, tomorrow's the 24th. Long list of schools on the 24th. Auburn, Boston College. You kind of wondered if Tomlin might go see his son at Boston College. Mm-hmm. There's the Iowa Pro Day. I'm not going to name all of them off here. Miami. They'll probably send Ike Taylor to that one. North Carolina, probably Arthur Smith. Good chance we see Arthur Smith show up at North Carolina on.
Could be a little awkward though. You guys offered me the job and I said no, but I'm back. Buddy Faulkner be there for Marion Hampton. I wonder.
That could be a possibility as well too. So and then on the 25th. What sticks out? I guess the Texas Pro Day maybe is the biggest name on the 25th. The 26th, Wednesday, you have LSU and Ohio State. They'll probably be at Ohio State, you would think, Tomlin and Kahn.
Mm-hmm. You got the Pitt Pro Day that day. They'll have, I'm sure, a presence there.
And then Notre Dame on the 27th.
Yeah, that's going to be one to watch certainly as well. So it should be a busy week. The Texas Pro Day, Will Zach Ghazzani be there? I think he was at Texas maybe last year or so. They got Matthew Golden, Isaiah Bond. So
Right.
we'll be pretty busy tracking these guys this week, Dave.
All right, and as you said, with them, it takes a lot to get Mike Tomlin to miss that Michigan Pro Day there. So I would think Kenneth Grant and at the very least will be in.
The last pro day I don't have Michigan listed for Tomlin and Kahn was 2018, but my notes back then didn't have Michigan even listed, so I don't know what happened. It might have been because they were so tight-lipped, it's hard to get that information out, and we never were able to confirm anything, but they've been going every year since at least 2019, sans the 2020 COVID year when those pro days got shut down pretty early into the process.
Right, right.
All right,
All right.
Dave, anything else from here? Let me just take your temperature really quickly. Jalen Milroe, so much buzz, and we discussed it already some. How realistic is taking a Jalen Milroe, let's call it third round?
I don't think you can rule it out. I don't think you can rule it out. I don't think you can rule out quarterback. It still feels like they might take one at some point. It will be interesting to see if Mike Tomlin indeed goes to the Ole Miss pro day with Jackson Dart there. If they're going to draft a quarterback, aren't they going to be present at the pro day more than likely?
They were in 2022, and there is some perspective to be had there. They courted all of those top names. Malik Willis, we had a lot of Malik
Right,
Willis discussions day back then. Matt Corral, who was at Ole Miss,
right.
Sam Howell, Desmond Ritter, of course, Kenny Pickett. And so they landed on the kid that was next door in Kenny Pickett. So some of this could certainly be due diligence. Now they're less likely to be in the first round conversation this year. So do they have to go explore every single quarterback? We'll see. My thought, and I'm not the only one to have it, but Milroe's gotten a lot of Justin Fields comparisons. And I think there's a lot of similarities between their game, their strengths, and their weaknesses. After missing out on Justin Fields, being unable to retain him, do they look at Milroe and say, we can go make him our Justin Fields?
Yeah, but yeah, you obviously would have to burn probably a third round pick to do it, though, right?
Yeah, I think so. His draft stock is sort of all over the map. There's been anything ranging from like first and fourth round discussion. I just have a hard time seeing that guy go in the first round. Could it be second round and Pittsburgh lacking a second round pick? That certainly makes these pieces harder to fit. But third round wouldn't surprise me, just given the inconsistencies and the real inaccuracy that Milroe shows. But I think Pittsburgh will look at that and say, we built up Justin Fields. We worked on his lower body mechanics, his footwork. Worked with Tom Arth, and Arthur Smith has built up Ryan Tannehill. He's built up Justin Fields, made those guys more successful. We can do the same with Milroe. And in the interim, if we draft Milroe in the third round, we'll dust off that Justin Fields package we had working on in 2024 and let Milroe get a couple snaps per game if to sub in for Aaron Rodgers, which maybe is a different discussion. Does Rodgers want to do that?
How would he like that? Yeah.
Well, just go with me here. Let's assume he's playing ball on that one the way that Russ did this year. So there were a lot of similarities there.
That's another talk about the dynamic that we had not too long ago. How is Aaron Rodgers going to act with any kid quarterback in that room? Look, kid, you're going to have to learn it on your own.
Yeah, I'm still less worried about that than you.
Okay.
But I get your point.
I mean, I suppose you got go ask Mason.
Yeah, there is Mason there at the very least, for sure. For sure.
And then what's this fan base going to think about a team that still likes to build through the draft and all? And look, I understand it's an important position quarterback, but if this team ends up not reacquiring a second round pick and all like that, you go from a first round defensive lineman and your next pick's in the third round's a quarterback who, if things go the way you think they should, won't even play 50 snaps.
Point taken. And that may be Rodgers' point too. Don't bring me here and then go draft a replacement. Give me some guys to win. But I think Rodgers would have to look at it on a presumed 1-year deal, that he is not the long-term option. And so it's a different dynamic than when the Packers took Jordan Love all those years ago, which was the smart move. It worked out for them. So they're all fair questions to ask, though.
Back to your original question. Is it plausible with Milroe? Yes.
If you had to guess at which quarterback beyond Cam Ward, Shadur Sanders is the most likely to be drafted, if I told you, Dave, I got a crystal ball, the Steelers did draft a quarterback this year. Let's say it's not round 1. who is the most likely name to be in that crystal ball?
It feels like there's two right now at this point. It feels like it's Jalen Milroe and Tyler Shuck.
That's true. Yeah, there's been a lot of reporting back and forth on their interest in Will Howard, on Jackson Dart, on Milroe himself. It's really been hard to get a read on it, and Shuck can't be forgotten about either, especially with some of the comments that Louis Riddick keeps making, and of course Shuck himself being brought in for a visit. So it's interesting because they're two different quarterbacks, like entirely. Milroe and Shuck are polar opposites in terms of their skill set. So it's kind of which flavor do you want? Do you want the pocket passer, the dynamic player? It'll be a big debate.
Now, remind me, was Arth at Louisville Pro Day?
Has Louisville had their pro day yet?
Or have they had their Pro Day yet?
Oh, I think it's this way. I thought I saw it on the list. Let's go back to our handy dandy pro day. It is Tuesday.
Oh, okay. All right. So that there's something to look for there on Tuesday. If at least let's see who else is
Now, no, Tomlin's not going to be there because he came in for Shuck came in for a visit, so they've had their meeting
right
with him. They're going to
But
have
wouldn't you want to
somebody
watch
there.
him go through his pro day the way they did with all those quarterbacks and all?
Yeah, but why bring Shuck in for a visit? Those quarterbacks did the 22 class, did they come in for visits? Did Malik Willis come in for a visit? I'm genuinely asking. I do not remember.
Well, I know
any.
they had. Remember the? I know he had the pro day dinner with him, right? Because
Sure,
they talked
yeah.
about eating the wings and all like that. So
Right. They went there, but I'm saying did they also come into the building?
I don't know. You'll have to look back.
It looks like actually they did. According to our tracker, it was Oladokin, Ritter, Howell. Remember Carson Strong? He came in.
Mhm.
Matt Corral and Malik Willis. So fair point by you. Maybe they do go to that pro day because they went to those pro days in 2022 and brought those guys in.
And then look, we didn't mention them. We still got the Ohio State Pro Day to go, and if Tomlin and Arthur there, and then they end up bringing Will Howard in, then that's another one that I think you add to the list of Milroe, Shuck, and Howard as potential being that guy. So it's still to be determined as we work through the rest of these pro days and these pro day or pre-draft visits.
Yeah, I think it's going to be really hard to identify which quarterback, if any, they're targeting because there are so many different skill sets and they might end up showing interest in all these guys. But it's obvious as it is, if they do entertain all these guys, then it really says they're going to draft one of them at some point. I remember back in 2022, there was some pushback. Oh, this team's not drafting a quarterback. Pittsburgh does not do smoke screens. They're going to be transparent so they can have as accurate of a read and eval in the process as possible. So if they're going to put all this time into quarterback, odds are very good they're going to draft one.
Right. I would agree.
All right, Dave, anything else before we get out of here? Any reader email us we can get to close out today's show? A programming note for Monday. We're scheduled to have the live stream. I believe we're going to have the live stream for those listening to this. There's a chance it may get canceled. We may have to do this a different day. We'll let you know. Tentatively, though, plan on there being a live stream Monday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time.
All right, let's go to Jonathan Ammerman. Writes in, this is the year to trade back, he says. Hello, Dave and Alex. I know suggestions are made yearly about trading back. I would love for the next precedent breaker to be that Omar and the Steelers are more willing than ever to move up and down the draft board. He says, with some decent needs to fill and no second round pick, I feel this one is one of the best times to trade back from the 21 pick overall. I could see two scenarios involving defensive linemen that would allow for a trade to make tons of sense. If there's a run of defensive linemen before pick 21 and the Steelers don't think the remaining guys are round one worthy, they can move back to the later portions of round one or early round two and snag a defensive lineman there, he says. And then if the depth of the position allows for multiple round one worthy defensive linemen to be available, they could move back and still get whoever from that list is still there with the later pick. He says, but between potentially double dipping at defensive line, running back, wide receiver, cornerback, safety, and quarterback, let alone a great prospect at a different position that we don't want to pass up, the Steelers could use more picks. What are your thoughts? All right, we're we'll be asked this from here, as is the case every offseason about will they trade up, will they trade down? I definitely see if they're going to do anything, I would think in the first round this year, and we have this discussion, I think every year of what's more likely, them moving up or moving down in the first round. I would definitely say the prospects of them moving down are greater than them moving up. Would you agree with that statement?
Yes, it's not impossible, but it's hard to see them move up given the already limited draft capital they have going into this draft.
All right, and B, it would be quite amazing if they traded out of the first round completely. And I mean, they're at 21. If they were to trade down, I can't envision them going more than say 2 or 3 spots down.
The last time Pittsburgh traded down in the first round, Dave, correct me if I'm wrong, is 2001, right? When they moved down 3 spots and
For
still got
Casey.
Casey Hampton. Now, Kevin Colbert's philosophy was we're only going to trade down the number of spots that we can guarantee we're going to love a prospect. So if there's 3 prospects on the board, we would be willing to take with our current pick. We're not going to move down more than 3 spots to guarantee that we're going to get at least one of those guys. Now, is Omar Khan's philosophy different? Potentially, probably, but we just don't have as much information. He has traded down, I think, once in his 2-year tenure, right? That first year, he traded down, I think, from 80 to 93 and still picked up Darnell Washington. That was still recoup picks after moving up for Broderick Jones, those 3 spots. So he's been more flexible than Kevin Colbert, who really didn't trade up or down that often at all, pretty rarely. So to answer the question, it's difficult because it just depends on what's on the board and what are the offers. Yeah, you really can't make a determination. I am generally team trade back to get more selections and have more chances to hit and fill more needs. And certainly without a second round pick, that's more attractive than ever. But if let's say that Harmon or Grant are off the board, or one of them is off the board, do you trade back and risk losing out on the other? And then what do you do with defensive line?
Right.
So, if given that D line is such a big need, you run a higher risk if you trade back 5 spots and miss out on one of those names.
Right. Yeah, look, and once again, this won't be the last time we get a question along these lines the closer we get to the draft and all. I obviously see the point that Jonathan's trying to make here, but it's impossible. I would be more in line to be team trade back for all the reasons kind of that he said. But how's the board? You got to lay out more than you got to lay out exactly who the top 20 picks are and who's left on the board and those kind of things, and all those things are just too tough to predict. But I definitely understand why we will probably get more questions and more suggestions on hoping that this team trades back in the first round.
And I agree that trading down is more likely than going up, but if Kenneth Grant's the last man standing at pick 18, 19, do you trade up to get him to ensure that you get him so you don't miss out on those top defensive line prospects? I mean, there's a case to be made for that as well.
Right. Yeah, I definitely understand that. All right, let's get one from Bryce here on Aaron Rodgers. As it pertains to Aaron Rodgers, can we please stop the madness? It's amazing to me how, as sports fans, we pick and choose which players we want to really focus in on and consistently call divas and cancers. He says Aaron Rodgers has shown to be both of those things times 10, and yet we don't give that nearly the attention it deserves. He's a bad locker room guy and was a big part in destroying that Jets team last year, he says. Plus, he doesn't want to run motion, doesn't really like play action, wants to run his 2010-ish Mike McCarthy offense. In the immortal words of Dave Bryan, I don't want to see it, he says. Number 2, based on how the team is currently constructed and having to rely on an early draft pick, I don't see us having a dominant D-line next year. So with that being said, should the Steelers zero in more on a stud corner in round 1 and go more of the will cover better to give our front 7 more time to get you the sort of to get to you sort of philosophy? All right. Even if you went and drafted a corner right now in round 1, Bryce, how soon are you going to get that kid on the field? When even Joey Porter Jr., he got on the field early, but when did he really start playing? Week 8, week 9, was
Yeah, I
it?
think his first start was right around there. He really came alive in that game against the Titans and DeAndre Hopkins midseason, which was week 9.
All right, and you went out and you gave Darius Slay a $10 million contract for 1 year. All right. It just even if you did the things that Bryce says here, uh how serious do you think they would be to get this quote unquote stud corner on the field?
It'd be tougher for sure, but there's a long-term view obviously as well beyond 2025 that you're drafting that corner for. And once Slay, assuming he's a 1-year thing, that opens up that corner for hopefully the next 8 plus years.
And you better get some good quality young mud in that room when it comes to defensive linemen, because you can get those guys on the field quicker, and in the process, even as they learn, they probably be better than some of that other stuff they have in that room right now that we ran over that list. And if they add any more to that room at this point, with experienced defensive linemen that might perk your ears up, it's probably going to come by somebody's cast off anyway. And how excited are you going to be about that player on top of it there? This defensive line, despite this team adding 3 people to that room over the course of this last week, is essentially still in the same place from a quality of overall room. It's Cam Hayward, it's Keanu Benton, and it's whatever comes in the draft early. It feels like.
I would answer the question in 2 ways. One, I don't like the philosophy of we can't make it great, so let's not make it good for the defensive lineup. It's going to be bad, so let's not try to improve it. And you can, if you find a stud defensive lineman and he becomes a stud, let's say Derek Harmon or Kenneth Grant, and it's him, Benton, and Hayward, that's a really formidable top 3 for at least the short term, as long as Cam Hayward plays for. B, I would say, what was that old Daniel Jeremiah uh, quote? You got to you got to shop at the hardware store before the toy store.
Oh
Now,
yeah.
corners probably it's not toy store level, but you want to build these teams inside out. And if you're getting run on and teams can run at will, then it's going to be hard to cover. It's going to be hard to defend the pass. In general, no matter how good of a cornerback tandem you might have, and so you have to build these teams inside out. That is why Pittsburgh has put so much attention into building the offensive line. How well it develops is an open question. The attention has to turn to the defensive line now.
And then what if you took this corner in the first round and it came to fruition that you got a running back or a quarterback in the third round, then you're telling me your defensive lineman is not coming in the fourth round? And I know this is a deeper class than most, but I want the top of the class.
Yeah, you can't count on any, even if it is a fourth round lineman, defensive lineman to come in and give you 700 snaps and play really quality ball.
Right. So, what do you think about? I have a feeling Bryce is going to have to learn how to get happy in the same pair of pants that he's upset in right now when it comes to Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, on that front, I understand it. I get the sentiment. I am not somebody pining for Aaron Rodgers. I've made that very clear, but it seems like there probably is no choice, and it is inevitable. And just quickly, cornerback is not a crazy thought in the first round. If Will Johnson were to fall, I get the value in that, but I didn't like the framing on defensive line in the question.
Okay. Look, let's end it this way. How many if this team signs, I don't think we have any more questions here. If this team signs Aaron Rodgers and they stay healthy, can this team win 9 games?
They can win 9 games with any quarterback you want to throw out there, Dave. But yes, they certainly can with Aaron Rodgers.
All right. So just it's a matter of then of how much more you can win.
Yeah, it's not Pittsburgh's not in a question of can they be competitive, can they grab a wild card spot, can they be in the hunt? They're just in their DNA to be that. As long as this defense is able to play at the level it is and doesn't have the same fall off as last year, they're going to be in the mix. It's a question of can you get over the hump? Can you win a playoff game? Can you go on a run and really compete in a really competitive AFC?
If they sign Aaron Rodgers, are you going to go look at the calendar of when the parade might potentially be just to make sure you don't have anything scheduled on that day?
No, and that's the other thing. Like, Rodgers might be an upgrade in some regards, but does he make you a Super Bowl or AFC contender against Mahomes, Josh Allen, Lamar, Burrow if they can add a defense? If CJ Stroud comes along, whatever Cam Ward ends up being, how well does Pittsburgh stack up against that?
Right. I agree. All right. We will get back after it. Maybe Monday night on the live stream. We'll try to keep you. Alex will tweet about that and all, and probably post on Facebook or something if that's gets either way. If it gets canceled, it's going to happen. So we'll have to play that by ear there. And if Aaron Rodgers does make a decision before Wednesday, I assume we'll probably have some sort of emergency podcast and go over 30 minutes of that or whatnot. But in the meantime, the next regular edition of the Terrible Podcast will be Wednesday morning, barring something spectacular happening like Aaron Rodgers deciding where he wants to play.
All right, sounds good. We'll talk to you when we talk to you. We'll keep you posted. But yeah, assume Monday live stream, assume Wednesday show. Any changes, we'll let you know.
All right. In the meantime, you can follow me on Twitter/X at Steelers Depot. Follow Alex at Alex_Kozora. Follow the show at Terrible Podcast. Email the show, theterriblepodcast@gmail.com. If you like what we do and want to donate to the cause, SteelersDepot.com. Hit the donate button, obviously. And if you want an ad-free version, hit the ad-free button. Follow the directions that way. Send your emails once again to theterriblepodcast@gmail.com. And until the next time we get together, as always, thanks for listening to the Terrible Podcast with Dave and Alex.